Hello everyone and welcome to our video on plant tissues and organs. This is part of our Module 2 Part 6 series looking at cell division, cell diversity and cell differentiation, and in this video we're going to be having a look at specification references 2.1.6i, the organisation of cells into tissues and organs, and 2.1.6l, the production of xylem vessels and phloem sieve tubes as examples of distinct differentiated outcomes derived from a common stem cell in meristems. First type of tissue that we're going to look at in our plants is the epidermal tissue. Now, if you watched the previous video in this series on the animal tissues, you will have heard of the epithelial tissue. So epidermal tissue is just the plant equivalent to the epithelial tissue in animals. So these cells are also flattened, but in our plants they also lack chloroplasts. What they're going to be doing is providing this protective covering over the bits of the plant that are exposed to these external conditions. And in some cases, the plant's actually going to impregnate these epidermal tissues with the substance called lignin. Now, hopefully you've heard of lignin back at GCSE where you looked at the xylem vessels. And the whole idea of lignin is that it actually forms a waterproof coating. And the idea of impregnating the epidermal tissue with lignin is that we're able to produce a waterproof cuticle. So basically a waterproof barrier to the outside world. Second type of tissue we need to know about in our plants is the vascular tissue. And this is just the transport tissue in plants. So what we've got are xylem and phloem. So the xylem and the phloem are two obviously individual tissues that are actually found together in a vascular bundle in our plants. When we're thinking about what they do, xylem is going to carry water and the mineral ions from the roots to all the parts of the plant, and the phloem carries those products of photosynthesis, the assimilates, from the leaves to the non-photosynthesizing parts of the plant. Our third type of plant tissue we need to know about is the meristematic tissue. And this is found in key regions of the plant, the meristems, and basically this is associated with regions where some kind of growth is occurring. So you're definitely going to find it in the root tips and the shoot tips, which is what you were taught back in GCSE, but we also find it in the vascular bundles in a region called the cambium. And the key thing about this meristematic tissue is it's made of meristem cells. The meristem cells are like the stem cells of our plants. So they've got a few key features you should bear in mind. Firstly, they've got thin walls with very little cellulose present. They do not have any chloroplasts. They do not have a large vacuole, and they're going to be able to divide by mitosis and then undergo that process of differentiation to become the different types of cells the plant requires, like palisade cells, etc. If we have a little look at one of these vascular bundles then, what we've got in our little microscope image here is an example of one of the vascular bundles. So what we've got in the big blue circle is just one of these regions. Now, what we can see is we've got the xylem on the right hand side, the phloem on the left hand side of the circle, and sitting between them you've got that region labelled the cambium. And this is where we're going to find those meristem cells that are then able to differentiate into the phloem and the xylem. Now, in order for those cells to actually differentiate into a xylem cell, what has to happen is we need to deposit lignin into the cell walls. And the idea of doing that is to reinforce them and to waterproof them. Because if we think about the function of our xylem, it's to transport water and those mineral ions. So we need it to basically be kind of like a waterproof tube running through our plant. The downside of actually depositing this lignin and waterproofing them is it is going to kill the cells. We also need to break down the end walls between the cells so that we've actually formed just a continuous column so that when the water is travelling through the xylem, it can do so as one continuous stream. The second type of tissue that our cambium can differentiate into are the phloem cells. Now, in order to become a phloem cell, then the cambium will have to obviously undergo the loss of their organelles. Now, what that means is we're going to have to obviously remove those organelles and break them down, and then we've also got to form these sieve plates between them. So if you look at the diagram there, you can see that the end walls have been replaced by basically these perforated plates. And that's to make it easier for these larger substances made in things like photosynthesis to pass through. We have a second type of cell associated with our phloem, which is called a companion cell. Now, the companion cells are these ones on the outside, and they are going to retain the organelles, because what they are going to be doing is providing ATP for an active process that then allows the sugars to be transferred into the sieve tube elements. So when we're thinking about our phloem, we've got two types of cell that we're making. Sieve tube elements lose most of their organelles and form those sieve plates between them, and the companion cells, they retain their organelles so that we can then generate the ATP necessary for the active loading of the sugars into the sieve tubes during the process of translocation. And you're going to find out more about that process in one of our later videos in module 3 that has a look at how the plants are actually able to transport all these substances around them. The final bit in this video is having a look at organs. Now, when we're talking about an organ, this is a collection of tissues working together to perform the same function. So if we consider the various tissues that we find in a plant, one good example is the leaf. Now, the leaf isn't just a single tissue, it's a collection of different tissues. We obviously have our palisade, we've got things like the spongy mesophyll, etc. And they're all working together to actually bring about that process of photosynthesis. We then have the root, is another organ of our plant, all to do with absorbing water and mineral ions from the soil, but it also anchors the plant into the ground. One other feature we might not always think about as far as the root goes is as a storage region. Now, if you think about other plants though, a carrot, for example, the bit that you're actually going to be chewing on when you eat a carrot is a root. So what we're able to do is obviously store quite a lot of material within that root structure as well. We then have our third organ of the stem, and this is obviously to do with transport, support, storage, and also giving the leaves a greater likelihood of getting access to sunlight, because obviously it's the stem that's going to allow the plant to get taller and therefore hopefully reach sunlight a little bit easier than if it was just creeping along the ground. The final plant organ we're going to remind ourselves about is the flower, and the flower is all to do with sexual reproduction in the plants. It's there to attract insects for that process of pollination. As always, I hope you found this video useful, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can see when more videos are uploaded, and then head on over to the website where you can find a range of other resources to help you in your A-level biology studies.